Hello, my name is James Nowak. I am the Associate Director of Enrollment Financial Aid Operations here at Canisius University. And today I'm hoping to get through some guidance on how to compare cost across multiple institutions. So the first part of that sort of analysis comes by way of what we call cost of attendance. Okay, so cost of attendance is a combination of what we call direct expenses and indirect expenses. D-A-N-C-E. So direct expenses are those things actually charged by the institution. For example, tuition and fees, and in some cases, housing and meals if you happen to be living on campus. So direct expenses are going to be the focus of the cost conversation. Direct expenses are what you're actually paying. Indirect expenses are things like transportation, books, supplies, and otherwise really ancillary costs associated with going to college, but the school is not sending you a bill for something like a personal expense or transportation. But just know that it is factored into the needs analysis that puts together your financial aid package, but we want to remove indirect expenses from the calculation at this point. So the first step in the financial aid awarding process in most cases is the receipt of what's called a merit scholarship. So that's usually the first piece of financial aid information that you're going to receive. So when we take those direct expenses, the first thing that we're going to subtract is the value of that merit scholarship. Now, hopefully, after you receive a merit scholarship, you have the ability to complete what's called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So the FAFSA is completed sort of in lockstep in a traditional year anyways with your admission to the institution. And then the FAFSA is your application for financial aid from the Department of Education, so federal, from New York State. So you will receive, if you're attending a New York State school, you'll receive an estimate for what's called New York State TAP, or Tuition Assistance Program. And then the FAFSA is also your application for additional need-based financial aid from the institutions for which you are applying by way of that FAFSA form. So what you'll receive after completion of the FAFSA is what we call a financial aid award letter. And that award letter is going to detail the rest of that financial aid eligibility. So we have merit scholarship, and then in some cases, we're going to have aid from the federal government. If you're a New York State resident attending school full-time in a New York State school, you should receive an estimate for what's called New York State TAP. Then every institution that you apply to is going to consider you for institutional need-based funding, so we'll call that institutional aid. After subtracting merit scholarship, federal aid eligibility, New York State TAP estimate eligibility, and institutional financial aid from direct expenses only, what you're left with is your net price, okay? That is the number that we need to use when we're comparing one school to another. I get the question all the time when a student is admitted to any college, they're awarded a merit scholarship, and they use that merit scholarship in an effort to hone in on net price, right? We can't figure out net price until we get through these steps in the process, right? So the FAFSA is critical in analyzing net price across institutions and comparing cost one way or another. So at the end of the day, after direct expenses, after we subtract financial aid eligibility from direct expenses and we get to net price, the next piece of information on that financial aid award letter is going to be federal loan eligibility, or what we call self-help. So there's your net price, right? And then there's how do we pay for it? And the first sort of and best option in financing your education by way of loans would be federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans by way of the FAFSA. So the only way you can get those loans is by completing a FAFSA. So you'll see on your award letter sort of the scholarship and grant aid first, then again, self-help or borrowing ability next, and then you could do the math on what your net price would be after those automatic loans from the Department of Ed, if applicable. And then the last piece of sort of self-help on the award letter, if you're eligible, you might be packaged with a federal work-study award. Now, work-study is an allocation, right? So I don't want to factor it anywhere here in terms of how much we have to come up with to finance our education. Work-study can be used, obviously, to pay your bill if you need to, but I don't like to factor it on the front end because, again, it's an allocation. So you have to find a job, apply for a job, get the job, start working the job, start earning biweekly paychecks. And at that point, yes, you could use that funding to sort of, pay towards any amount due to the institution. But I take that out on the front end of this part of the process and when we're comparing net price across multiple schools. So an example of cost of attendance, and this example here is representative of a prospective resident student here at Canisius. And the first data point I'd like to bring your attention to is that cost of attendance, as mentioned, that's $50,230, right? Now that number is different from direct expenses. Okay, so this number here includes those indirect budget components that I mentioned earlier, so transportation, books, and things like that. So 48060 represents costs that need to be paid directly to the school. The difference between that number and the comprehensive cost of attendance, this 2170, like I mentioned, are those indirect budget components. So here's your cost of attendance. Broken direct cost, 48060 here, broken out by tuition and fees, and then housing and meals, and then you can see they sum up to the 48060. So this is your direct cost of attendance as a resident student, potential resident student here at Canisius, and then we start chipping away with different pieces of financial aid and how we're gonna accommodate that. So again, first, the Merit Scholarship. This should be the first piece of financial aid information that you receive, and then hopefully you're able to get through the financial aid and FAFSA processes, and we can start to talk through subsequent financial aid eligibility. So I've layered in maximum federal Pell Grant. So the maximum Pell Grant for the upcoming academic year is $73.95. Maximum New York State TAP estimate. Now again, we estimate TAP on the front end of this process. The reason for that is New York State does take a little bit of time to analyze the contents of your application and give you an actual dollar amount and communicate that information to us. So on the front end of this process, we will provide you with a good faith estimate. And then finally, consider you for institutional need-based grant funding. So all of that sums to 36060, and this represents obviously money that does not need to be repaid by way of either being scholarship aid or grant aid. And then we subtract that 36060 from the 48060, and this 12,000 represents your true annual net price here at Canisius. And then the next part of this conversation is, okay, once we've honed in on net price annually, how do we pay for it, right? And that's where we get into self-help. Again, most students are packaged with two different types of federal loans. In this case, dependent freshmen would be offered $3,500 in what is referred to as subsidized federal loan eligibility. So subsidized loans are interest-free until 6 months after the student graduates. And then $2,000 unsubsidized loan. The only difference there is the unsubsidized is going to begin to accrue interest right away. So assuming the student is interested in taking advantage of those loans as a first ditch effort to satisfy this net price, we'll subtract the $5,500 loan eligibility from the $12,000 annual balance, and then what we're left with is a net price of $6,500 after loans. And the next step is to really talk through additional borrowing options. Maybe we're going to borrow from a Parent Plus loan or a private alternative loan, or maybe we can make payment arrangements. But this all to say, this is how we break down the difference between direct expenses, indirect expenses, all in an effort to really hone in on true net price per academic year. And then I'd like to even take it a step further. So that's net price for 1 year. Let's multiply that by 4 because we really want to wrap our minds around total program cost, and more importantly, how do we pay for it, right? And what does that look like in terms of repayment after graduation and things like that? So we are here to help with this part of the process for you and your family. Whether it be to sort of navigate the differences between direct expenses, indirect expenses, the sort of nuances and differences between award letters across multiple institutions. We can help break down all of this information into what really matters, which is net price, and help you compare that across multiple institutions. So we're here to help. Please don't hesitate to reach out.